As a person in business, you should never feel bad about getting advice from professionals, and that's exactly what accountants do for us. Even if we don't need them full time, it's good to consult with them on a regular basis just to make sure we have everything set up right initially and that we're still doing everything correctly. They also can help us make little adjustments that we need to. Well, when we were looking at our real-world example, we realized that things have to balance out on the left and the right side of the equation. And at the end, we found out that our balance sheet's going to show that our assets and liabilities match in the amount of $11,850. Those assets are going to include cash, accounts receivable, and existing inventory, while our liabilities and equity are going to show entries for accounts payable and capital that we have in the company. With that as background, we can now go ahead and look at the financial statements inside of Peachtree. I've opened up the sample file from the welcome screen, and we're going to use the sample file to take a look at what some finalized reporting might look like. The first thing I want to do, though, is actually look at the chart of accounts. Remember, this is kind of the basis for everything. So let's go ahead and take a look at that by moving up to the Lists menu and simply coming down and choosing Chart of Accounts. What we can see in the Chart of Accounts is information that now we're actually expecting. We have account ID numbers, then we have a description, then we have a type of account, and we have a running balance. So as an example, in this particular account, we have petty cash. That, of course, is a cash account, and there's currently about $327 or so in it. As we scroll down through this list, you'll be able to see several of those categories, like cash, accounts receivable, assets, liabilities, expenses. All of those different categories are in here. I know that when you try to look at all of it at once, it can look very confusing. So usually when you're working with your own file, getting it up and running, you're going to look at one thing at a time. For example, what types of income do I have? That'll make it a little bit more manageable. I'm going to go ahead and close this down by clicking on the close button on the right side. And I'm going to move back down to the General Journal. Back to the List menu. And choose the General Journal entries. While you certainly can make entries directly to the General Journal, it's really not recommended. We'll talk more about that in some later chapters. But I just wanted to show you that this is here, and this is where you would have to know how to do double-digit entries. There are a few different transactions that are included, and I'm going to go ahead and double-click so we can see what one of them is. When I double-click on the entry, it opens up so I can take a look. So we can first of all see that there's a date, then there's a reference. It's always good to put in reference numbers so you know what things are about. And then we can see that this is a very simple entry with both a debit and a credit. So what this was a transfer between bank accounts, a transfer from regular checking to payroll checking. So we took a $50,000 debit from one account and then a $50,000 credit in the other account. If you look at the bottom of the screen, it summarizes these because sometimes you will have multiple line items. Regardless of whether you have 2 or 20, it doesn't matter. These always have to balance out. If they don't, you'll see at the bottom it will tell us that we are out of balance and by how much. You have to have it back in balance before you can save this transaction. So the journal entry here was used to simply move money, and that's great. We can open it up, we can take a look at it, and this is really the first place we can see where we definitely are using that double entry accounting in order to make sure that we take money from one place and put it back in another. Now that we're familiar with these accounts, let's go ahead and close this window. And then we also need to close out the list or the register. And then we're going to take a look at some reports. So let's go to the Reports and Forms menu. Give that a click. Let's come down right about to the middle and choose Financial Statements. And what you will see is that Peachtree is ripe with tons of reports that you can look at. There really are a lot. They're pretty self-explanatory, but it's nice that they also do have a description. So for example, I can see gross profit by department. This is a custom report designed for Bellwether that details each department, so on and so forth. So a lot of good information. Well, what we're trying to find out, though, is about the specific P&L as well as the balance sheet. So a P&L or a profit and loss can also be called an income statement. Let's go ahead and double click on one of these. Let's do a standard consolidated income statement. Because this is a report where we can choose the time period, it requests that, and we can do the current period, previous quarters, previous years. We really can change just about anything we want. I'm going to leave it at the default and go ahead and say OK. And that will generate our report. So what we're able to see here is for the current month and year to date, all of our revenues are at the top. You don't need to worry about all of the details here, but just look and notice that the total revenues right now for the month are $88,000 and some change. The next thing that we do is we go down after we do total cost of sales, and we get a gross profit of $64,588. Then we can find some expenses. Again, those are all listed individually. Some of them have zero values, others do not. But the ultimate thing that we have to look at is that when we get to the bottom and we take our income minus our expenses, that's where we get our net income. So for the current month, it's $3,813.43, and overall for the year, about almost $32,000. So remember that the P&L uses all of those temporary accounts, and the P&L is going to be for a specific period of time. Current month, current period, year to date, those types of things. That's different than our balance sheet. So let's close this one out by clicking on the close button on the upper right. Brings us back to our reports dialog, which is open down below. And let's go ahead and take a look at that balance sheet, the standard balance sheet. We'll say OK. And here we go. So you can see that this one is maybe in some ways a little bit more simplified. We have an entry for assets, or actually a category for assets. And then as we scroll down, we will also see that we have liabilities. This again is summarizing a lot of the detail that we saw in the prior sheet. So the important part to look at here, of course, is again those totals. So we have total current assets followed by some other totals. And it keeps going and going for all of our assets until we finally get to the bottom number with the double underline, and it's roughly about $500,000, $504,571. That, of course, is then followed by liabilities and capital. Those, again, are listed out. And, of course, the important bottom line is that this number also is exactly equal to the same number, $504,571.36. The balance sheet, as the name suggests, has to balance, and that's where that accounting equation comes into play. The two sides have to balance out. The P&L, on the other hand, is more about math. What were my expenses? What was my income? When I subtract my expenses from my income, that actually is going to give me the number that tells me what my profit is. So as you can see, all of this is going to come together with the accounting and math in the background. You don't have to actually worry about any of the math, but it's going to come together and provide accurate, reliable information. By simply understanding what's going on in the background, we can then let Peachtree do all the heavy lifting.